Ah, yes. Listen to the sound of the water hitting the sailboat. Hey, hello, everybody, and welcome to Tom Rhodes Radio Smart Camp. This is, episode 300. To be honest with you, I didn't know if I'd ever reach 300. I started this podcast in 2009. The early years, it was very sporadic. And there's been times where I wanted to give up and not keep going with the podcast. But it's you, Patreon subscribers, the people that give money to me every month, is why I keep putting all my love into this podcast. And for those of you who remember the old beginning, I had this fantastic intro song where I said, I'll take you to the cliffs, to the peaks of Machu Picchu, the canals of Amsterdam. Well, today for episode 300, I am sitting on a sailboat in the center of Lake Tahoe. And who knows how many dead bodies of mafia hits are tied to cinder blocks down on the bottom of this lake, right where we're speaking. But the wonderful, lovable human being who brought me here on the sailboat is Mr. Cameron Hattan. Welcome to the program, my brother.
Thanks, Tom. I'm really happy to be here. This is amazing being out on the water like this.
Yeah, and for the listener, they should know that this has been like 5 or 6 years in you telling me I'm going to take you out on a sailboat on Lake Tahoe, and then after years of promises, you finally delivered. So
absolutely, we met 5 or 6 years ago here, and we were going to try to get on a boat then, but the weather wasn't right. And then there's a very finite window of when we can do this on Lake Tahoe, and finding a match when you're in town and I'm in town, and I'm glad we finally got to come out and do this after all these years.
Yeah, and you taught sailing lessons on Lake Tahoe for years, and then your other business, which we're going to talk about, kind of took you away from this line of work.
Yeah, I've taught sailing all over the West Coast, off and on for many years on Lake Tahoe here, and then in Marina del Rey, back and forth between there and Catalina Island. And then my wife and I rebuilt a sailboat and lived on that in Mexico for about a year and a half before coming back up to California.
Wow, that's some real bohemian shit. So, and then you'd take the dinghy into town to get tacos and...
Every day I woke up and I would go surfing and hit some great spots and then start the morning with the Pacifico. And Shannon was working as a consultant, so she just needed some Wi-Fi to keep going. And then I would do the boat maintenance and pick up fruit and things for breakfast, and she would work until early in the afternoon, and then we'd break for tacos and lunch and happy hour. And we did that for quite a while, living in Baja, first in Ensenada, and then sailing down the coast up into San Jose del Cabo, and finally La Paz, where the boat's been for quite a while now in storage.
So how did you have the money to do this? Had you just saved up, or you could just lived off the wind and...
We saved up for it, and we worked for it, and then while we were there after a while, that's when the economy took the big downturn, and I couldn't find any work down there, and Shannon's office wasn't too appreciative of her working from Mexico and billing them in the States, so we had to change, we had to come back up, and we ran out of parts and money.
How ironic when all the companies want to outsource to cheaper countries.
Yeah, we actually had, we broke the raw water pump on the boat, on the engine, which is one of the main cooling components, so we couldn't run the engine anymore, and we drifted for 3 days in the Sea of Cortez with no wind.
I wanted to hear this. Is this the worst thing that ever happened to you from sailing?
No, in fact, it turned out to be an amazing adventure.
So tell me what happened. The Sea of Cortez, it's Baja California is the long peninsula. Mm-hmm. If you further down from San Diego into Mexico, and John Steinbeck wrote a book about the Sea of Cortez. Yeah. So I've always wanted to see it. So is it flat or is it choppy?
It can be choppy. They have these winds called coramels that can come out of nowhere, and they will just blow 30 miles an hour and just wreak holy hell through there. You have to be really prepared for things like that. It's just like any other sea, but it's enclosed, so the wind's a little more shifty and choppy. And then you also have...
Does that sound mean we're going to die?
No, that sound means... So what we've done with the boat is we've done what's called heaving to, and so you have the two sails. We're in a sloop, so we have a mainsail and a jib. And generally, both of those sails work together in conjunction like a wing to pull the boat forward. We're not being pushed in most of the instances with the boat. We're being pulled by the shape of the foil of the sails. And so what we have is our jib is pulled into the wind, and our mainsail is pushed downwind. So as the mainsail tries to turn us into the wind, the jib pulls us away from the wind. So we can sit here virtually immovable. We'll just rock with the waves and the wind, and generally you just put the helm all the way to starboard and leave it there, and it'll hold. But it's a great way.
This might be the first episode wherever I got seasick.
I was amazed that you were. They were down here.
Do you need to check on that, Captain?
Let me check on this really quick.
I mean, episode 300 or not, our lives might be at stake. When you hear a big thud on a boat, that's never good. What was that? Just the sail swinging from one side to the other?
Well, that's one. Yeah, it was the sail swinging from one side to the other. And what happens on Tahoe is the wind's really shifty, and so not like on the ocean, you're going to have generally a consistent wind. And
yeah, I thought it would be kind of still here, but you said that the ocean is more calm and tranquil than Lake Tahoe.
It's more consistent in one direction. So just kind of...
Hang on, we're about to learn about zephyrs.
And if you see this coming in, turn...
That's more calm.
Yeah.
So you were explaining to me before about these zephyr winds.
Yeah, the zephyr winds, they come off of the hills here in Lake Tahoe, and the wind shifts from any direction at any time, so you don't have anything consistent or reliable where you can just set your sail, set your course, and head off in a direction. The wind's going to be shifting and changing and doing all kinds of crazy stuff, like it's doing right now and giving Shannon fits up there. One more time. Nope, don't do that.
Our lives might be in danger. So Lake Tahoe is one of the most beautiful places in the United States, in my opinion. And when I come here, and it's a massive freshwater lake, in case you've never been. California is on one side, Nevada is on the other side. I'm performing this week at the Improv at the Harvey's Casino. I play here once a year normally, just because I enjoy coming here, and the money's really good. And Mark Twain spent time around Lake Tahoe. And then if you remember the old classic Western television show Bonanza, they were close to Lake Tahoe. And remember it was a single father, Pa, and then he had 3 sons from 3 different wives. Little Joe, played by Michael Landon, and then there was Ben, who was the handsome brother. And then there was Haas, the big, enormous, football-sized brother. And, he's pulling ropes out there.
They're called lines on a boat.
They're called lines?
Yep. Ropes are for dirt, lines are for the water.
Okay, ropes are for dirt, lines are for water. So I've always wondered, what kind of wildebeest did Pa fuck to produce Haas on the show Bonanza? Anyway, that's an old hacky joke from the 80s. No, I don't know what it is. But yeah, a lot of history. But the thing about Lake Tahoe that I always think about is it's fresh water, and the pioneers and the people who came westward and all that desert that they crossed, and they must have just been dying for fresh water. When they finally came upon Lake Tahoe, they must have lost their mind. All this endless fresh water and beautiful scenery. I was just filling time while you saved our lives.
Oh, I like to think it was that dramatic, but it's crazy.
When you were out there, you were intensely pulling lines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just adjusting the sails. The wind's always going to change on you, just as long as you know to adjust your sails. And
so that's why you said Lake Tahoe is actually a very difficult place to sail, because the winds are constantly changing directions, and then the zephyrs coming in off the mountains.
Yeah, you get this cold wind. We still have snow. It's August right now. It's the 1st of August, and we have all the snow up on top of the peaks. But it's over 80, almost 90 degrees out here today, I think.
It's absolutely perfect.
Yeah, so we have these great cold winds coming off the hills and the mountains, and they rush down to the lake from all different directions, and they shoot straight up from the sides to the middle of the lake. So you almost always have wind coming off the land around the perimeter of Lake Tahoe, but it swirls and gets diffused in the middle, so you never know which way it's going to shift or change. So you always have to watch the sails. You're always reading the water. You're always looking for those ripples I pointed out on the water. You can see where the wind's coming and where it's going and how it moves, and you can read it.
Sun sparkles on top of water is probably one of my favorite visual things in the world.
Absolutely. Especially when you have a little bit of psilocybin rolling and it turns into little rainbow sparkles and it looks all beautiful.
Now, you said that a couple of factoids about Lake Tahoe. You said that the mountains, you can still see snow on top of some of the mountains. And you said that when there's not snow, the Native Americans from this part of the world took that as a very bad sign. I was like...
yeah, and there's one specific spot that it does that. It's called Mount Talak. And in there it has a cross in the rocks that's basically just ridge lines, but from a distance it looks like a cross made out of snow. And in all of the years I've worked here or taught here or been through Tahoe, only once have I ever seen it where there is no snow in Mount Talak. And that traditionally, you know, we hear all the old stories that, according to local Native Americans, that's not a good sign.
It's interesting, these old Native American things, and who knows even if they're accurate or if, you know, white people made it up. But I remember when I lived in San Francisco for years, I was told that the Native Americans from the Bay Area looked at the peninsula that is now San Francisco as their spiritual healing land. And that if something was wrong with them, or if they were sick or heavy-hearted, they could go there and be healed. But if they stayed too long, they went crazy. Now, I don't know if that's bullshit.
Well, salt water heals all wounds, whether it's tears or the ocean. You know, it's they always say the salt water is the amazing thing. Another neat thing about San Francisco there is it was many years of sailors sailing by San Francisco,
They didn't see
never
it.
knowing it was there because of the fog and the way the inlet's shaped. I just got to sail under the Golden Gate Bridge. I delivered a boat from Moss Landing down south up under the Golden Gate Bridge last year, and it was really beautiful to sail in under the Golden Gate.
Wow. I would love that.
It's beautiful.
I did that on a bar party boat once, years ago. You know, where they had like people...
Party barge.
Yeah, the party barge. That's the only time I ever sailed underneath it. But then there's that Fort Point, which is right underneath. I've been there. That's cool. People surf there and everything.
It's a great spot to stop when you drive. I love going back and forth. You can't help but smile when you drive across the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah, it's true. And what is the? Now you got my brain in San Francisco. I wanted you to tell me the Jacques Cousteau factoid about Lake Tahoe and all the mafia dead bodies and stuff. So
yeah,
let's regale the listener with that piece of information.
Well, I've got this story from somebody who has spent his entire life here. He's third generation that grew up here, and his family's been here for a long time, even back when the Mafia had this as their little playground. In fact, they just filmed Godfather 2 just over here on the west side.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. Oh, yeah. I love that scene in the movie.
Fredo running around. It's beautiful up here where they filmed that. Well, anyways, I was getting a history lesson about all of the volcanic mountains around here from this guy who's lived here his entire life, and he was telling me stories about going fishing with his uncle. And if they ever snagged a line in certain places, his uncle would just reach over with a pocket knife, cut his line, and say, "We don't drag anything in from around here." And he was referring to all the mafia that was here, and that they had a habit of disposing of people in the lake because it's the second deepest lake in North America. It's crystal clear blue water and everything. You can't get that far, and there's nothing down there. And the rumor was that years later, Jacques Cousteau wanted to bring a submersible here and do a mapping, which is actually called bathymetry, which is a neat word. You have topography for the shape of the land above the water, and bathymetry is the shape of the land under the water.
Wow.
So they were going to do a bathymetrical, I won't even try that one, a study of the bathymetry of the bottom of the lake. And the rumor is that a bunch of the old guys from the casinos and some unnamed people gave him a bunch of money to go do research somewhere else. And apparently he did.
Wow. Wow. What is your favorite English word? Is it bathymetry?
Bathymetry is a beautiful word.
It's a
I love it.
beautiful
Yeah,
word.
it's a fantastic word. It just rolls.
Yeah. Now, what was so when you were on the Sea of Cortez and your sails went out and you were drifting?
Well, we had the engine. We broke the raw water pump, so we couldn't cool the engine. We couldn't run the engine. So all we had was our sails, which we are proficient at living under sail without an engine. We can sail in and out of anchors, and this is a 45-foot, 30 gross ton boat. It looks a lot like the same boat from Captain Ron. It's a very large, heavy boat. It's not a fast little zippy boat. And Shannon and I have sailed it in and out of anchorages in storm conditions by ourselves several times, and we train for that. We learned to do that. However, in the Sea of Cortez, what happened during that time is there was zero wind whatsoever for over 3 straight days, and the engine didn't work, so we couldn't sail, we couldn't motor, we couldn't do anything. And we're in the middle of the shipping channels between the Baja Peninsula and mainland Mexico. And so we would have these large tankers bearing down on us a few times a day. And I would get on the radio and try to signal them that we were there, we were disabled, we couldn't sail. Never heard a word back from any of them. And so we would take turns watching. We would set the anchor alarm, which tells us if we move out of a certain radius position. And we'd have that set up to let us know if we were getting too close to land, and we'd take turns napping. And finally, over 3 days, we had whales near us. We had dolphins coming up and playing around us. And after 3 days of getting little tiny whispers of wind, we were able to ghost the ship back towards La Paz. And the channel into La Paz is very long. It's over a mile long and very narrow. So you have to tack or jibe, which means turning the boat into the wind or away from the wind to get back in there. And it's very difficult to do without an engine or no wind. And so at the end of the 4th day, we were getting to where we could almost yell at the docks where we had left, several weeks earlier. And we were getting in there, and the sun was going down, and we had just enough of a whisper of wind behind us to push us towards the dock. We radioed ahead to get an outside slip so we could just pull up to the outside and tie up. And right as we got within 50 feet of the dock, the sun went down, the wind stopped, and then as the sun goes down, the wind shifts. And so automatically the wind started blowing from the docks and pushing us away from the docks after we spent all these days trying to get there without an engine. And we flagged down a fisherman in his little panga, and he pushed us the last 50 yards into the dock.
Wow. So if that wasn't the worst thing that ever happened sailing, what was the worst story?
On the way down, I've had a lot of crazy experiences sailing, especially in the Caribbean. But
you ever been robbed by pirates?
We were the pirates. Hold up a flare gun and a can of gas, and nobody's ever going to mess with you. That's what we talk about in there, because everybody talks about the pirates and if you're going to have problems. But that's all of our. Hold up a flare gun and a can of gas, and nobody's going to mess with your boat.
When I was in Thailand in the Phi Phi Islands, I saw these young Thai families on boats. They didn't live anywhere, and they were called. They were like sea gypsies, what, and so they just like sailed. I thought, how, they're not educated. I mean, the people like little kids probably never been to a school, but I thought, what a great life that kind of Swiss Family Robinson or Robinson Crusoe rather.
They make
and they just go to these little islands and live off fish and whatever they find growing there.
They're incredible divers, and there's a group of those people that they've done studies on. They found out, I think it's their gallbladders have become enlarged because they spend so much of their time free diving for oysters and things on the bottom that they absorb oxygen at a lower rate than you or I. And so they're able to dive longer. It's just an adaptation from them from diving all their lives. They hand make their own masks, fins, and goggles. The boat people are amazing. It's phenomenal to see that. And when Shannon and I were living on our boat, we ran into a lot of families who were raising their kids at sea. And you'd run into these kids that were 8, 10, 12 years old, and they were the most responsible, amazing people you'd talk to because they're standing watch. They're making sure that the bilge pumps work. They're making sure that the engine has oil in it and all these little jobs because, there's nothing free on a boat. Everybody has to earn their way doing something, even if it's just, bringing cold water to everybody or making sure that everybody is on the right watch schedule. But we run into these families and these kids that are just phenomenal. And
what a life!
Yeah,
and, the knowledge of the sea, of boating, of fishing. Mm-hmm. I mean that's more valuable than whatever.
And they're comfortable, and you being a traveler, being able to be comfortable walking into a situation where you don't speak the language or you don't know the layout of the town, and just being able to know that you can do this. You have the confidence in yourself that you can travel and not have to have somebody hold your hand or Google Maps or, you can buy a book, the old Frommers, and go travel with nothing but a book. And I think that's one of the greatest experiences anybody could ever have. It changed my life. My dad took me out of school my senior year. And took me to Honduras, where I got to set up
on a boat.
No, we flew on this one, and we went down. He's an optometrist, and so we collected glasses through the Lions Club, and then we cleaned them, fixed them, and categorized them, and boxed them up. And we took 30,000 pairs of glasses that I'd spent the previous year cleaning and fixing, and then we flew to Honduras. and we set up free clinics all over the northern coast of Honduras and La Ceiba, La Union, on El Rio Cuero. And we would go up and set up these clinics, and we had a couple doctors on staff, and then we had some aid workers that helped us, and the people would line up for days to see the first eye doctor they'd ever seen in their lives. And these people would walk through and see the doctors and see everybody, and by the time they'd get to me, they would have a slip of paper with their prescription on it, and they would hand that to me, and then I'd go through all of these hundreds of boxes and find a prescription that was close to what was written on the paper for them in a frame that would fit them. And it was really neat to see this, as I had just turned 18 that week. And one of the most unique things was I saw a 3-year-old girl who was legally blind, had never seen anything in her life. And when she came to me with her mother, I looked at the paper, and these were Coke bottle, thick prescription. She was legally blind, couldn't see a thing in life. And I thought, oh my God, there's no way we're going to find this for a 3-year-old. And so we started digging through the boxes, and we found a beautiful little pink pair of glasses that were her exact size with almost the exact prescription that she needed. And I got to put the glasses on her face and see her face the first time she ever got to see anything.
Wow.
Which was a Kleenex box with cartoon animals on it. And then her
Did
eyes...
she cry? Or
she started just yelling, "Mama, Mama, Mama." And then her mom said, "Yes, dear," to her. And she turned and saw her mother for the first time clearly.
Wow.
And it was just... And then I had to go back and finish my senior year, which kind of made everything else look like a booger. But it was just... That just made me just love travel all the more.
What a nice thing to do.
Yeah. And so ever since then, that's,
There's people in Honduras waiting for you to come back any minute.
I'd love to get back there. I made so many great friends and met so many beautiful people down there. And you'd see these guys that they would work. They would get like $1 for 1,000 coconuts that they would harvest, shuck, and bring in to be shipped out. And you'd watch people who lived in conditions that we would think would just be horrible, and they're some of the happiest, kindest, most caring people. And we weren't staying in hotels. We weren't going and eating in restaurants. We lived on people's floors, and they were giving us all of their meat rations to serve us one meal, to make us a fantastic meal with the family. And it just really made a big impression on me that what was really important, and that just really made me want to travel more. And so through my life, that's one thing I've always tried to do, is anytime an opportunity comes to travel, I'll drop everything to go. I'll try to.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I want to cover a few different topics with you, but I want to say, I told you when we were driving over here that I grew up in Florida. I love boats. I love being on boats. I love being on the water, near the water. Just boats have always made me happy. Lived in Amsterdam, been on boats in Alaska, Florida, the Hong Kong Harbor, many places in the world. This story that I was telling you about, this friend of mine from Florida, real Florida ocean boat guy, we were in Key West, and he was taking us out every day, and he would catch lobsters, and when he would catch them, he would snap off their antenna and clean out their asshole with the antenna. And he said that was the best way to clean the shit out of a lobster. And I thought, how unfortunate. You're about to be murdered and eaten, and then you have one of your, antennas shoved up your own ass. So it'd be like someone ripping off your arm and sticking it up your asshole. It'd be very, very unpleasant.
It would. I think some people would pay extra for that, though.
Yeah, I think probably Germans would be really into that. So where did you fall in love with boats? When did that happen?
I learned to sail in Boy Scouts when I was a kid in Idaho.
I just learned how to do knots.
We had 3 laser sailboats donated to our Boy Scout camp, and I was working on the waterfront as a lifeguard. And we just fooled around on them on this little lake in Harvard, Idaho. And at the end of the season, we didn't know what to do with them, and they were just going to be put in storage until the next season. And so we had room in our horse barn in the back of that to bring them down. So I grew up on the Snake River on the Washington-Idaho border. And
where Evel Knievel jumped over?
He was a little further south. We're closer to the University of Idaho in Wazoo, but we have a mountain that looks like
out the wazoo?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Out the wazoo right there.
And one of my mom's favorite expressions, when there's an overabundance of something.
Or an antenna in the wazoo if you're a lobster.
So that's really interesting that you grew up on the border of Idaho and Washington, which you don't think is a real nautical place.
It really isn't, and we learned the hard way on everything because I also learned to scuba dive in that river, and we would take the boats out and we'd sail, and we learned pretty quickly if you weren't upwind or far enough upstream enough by the time the sun went down, you were going to be paddling to the shore and dragging your sailboat all the way back up the riverbanks to get back home to the marina. And so we basically learned by banging and breaking everything that we can get our hands on, and spent a lot of time in cold water and dragging boats back to the marina.
Wow. So I wanted to tell you the worst thing that ever happened to me sailing on a boat. So the very first time I ever went to Malaysia, well, first of all, you need to know the backstory that one of the best friends I made when I lived in Amsterdam was this guy named Sam Coleman. He's been on my podcast. He lives in Sweden now. But he was a journalist, and he was the editor of Expatriates magazine. And when I had my late night talk show in Amsterdam, he put me on the cover of the magazine, and he interviewed me. And I ended up being really great friends with this guy. Really interesting, intellectual dude. He got the job as the editor for Esquire magazine of Malaysia. So I had never been to Malaysia. I had been everywhere else in Asia. And he got me in touch with the people who put on a comedy gig there. I set up a gig. But basically I had gone there for a week to visit my friend. And he told me Kuala Lumpur is a great city. There's a lot of glamour. There's a lot of fashion. I mean, it's a Muslim country. You wouldn't think that. But so him being the editor of Esquire magazine, he got to go to all these amazing events all the time. So I had a great week with him, going to like some chef awards, some watch awards, but then he had to cover this rich guy regatta, this sailing race, and it was from Penang to Langkawi. So we had to fly up from Kuala Lumpur to Penang. Penang, beautiful old city, and great street food, and where it is in these straits or whatever you call it, there's just been a long history of different ethnicities and foods and stuff. And the race started there, and Langkawi is like the Hawaii of Malaysia. So it's all these rich guys with sailboats. And there was some Chinese shipping magnate dude, very wealthy dude, who invited us to go on his sailboat for this race. And he told Sam, don't bring anything, everything's covered. So you would think that would include food, right? So we're, sailing. I think it's the journey normally is supposed to take like 5 hours or 6 hours. A big storm hit, and we blew out the sails. And I remember that the ship was sideways for like an hour. And I remember we're in the hull of the boat. We're on the inside part. This is called the hull, right?
The cabin.
The cabin, yeah. Right? I remember the boat being sideways, and like I'm on the couch like this, but I had my feet on the edge of the boat, and it was terrifying. I thought, we might die here. And you were saying before that this boat can't tip over. How is it possible that a sailboat cannot tip over, especially like if there's just wind completely blowing it sideways like that?
We have a weighted keel below the boat. So like speed boats and things like that have V holes that are fairly shallow, but we have a fin that sticks out below the boat, and it's weighted, generally with lead or something very heavy that rights it. And even if we have the sails up and we have what's called a knockdown, if the wind came and hit the boat so hard that it pushed the sails over into the water, it would break the hold of where the keel is, and the boat would spin into the wind. So it's not going to flip unless something catastrophic happens where the hull breaks. These boats are designed really well to right themselves, turn into the wind, and you're going to get banged around and knocked around, but the boat's not going to go over. So the wind will spill off the top, the keel will right the boat back up.
Wow, okay. So I don't know why, but we had to pull the entire sail into the cabin. Mm-hmm. And it's raining, and the boat's sideways, and I didn't want to do anything. I was there for like a luxury cruise, Mm-hmm. And it turned out that guy did not have one peanut to eat on that boat. And I think it took us 11 hours before we got to Langkawi. And we were just, I could have eaten the ass out of a donkey. I was starving.
Mm-hmm. Racers are crazy people. We call ourselves cruisers.
I think it's a bunch of rich guys.
It is. Well, and the racers, when they get these boats, they'll take the heads off the boat, so there's no toilet. They won't let you bring anything but power bars to eat. You're not allowed, because they want to have the minimum amount of weight on the boat so that they can have the fastest boat. And generally we say about racers is if they want to be a racer...
How much does a sandwich weigh?
Exactly. These are people who are tweaking their sails every little millimeter to change the shape of it, to get the perfect airfoil for the perfect lift. And with us, you saw we brought fruit and wine and cheese and hummus and all kinds of goodies.
That's what I call a nice day out on the water.
This is what we're going to have a good time. The racers are fine. That's a whole nother breed of sailor. But I like to come out, whenever there's two boats on the water, it's obviously a race. But in fact, in that same area in La Paz, Shannon and I competed in a race. And we were the first ones to cross the starting line because we had the best line of attack. However, we were the 30 gross ton boat, and we were competing against all these little small boats, trimarans. And by the time we were sailing to another island in the Sea of Cortez, staying for the night and then sailing back. And I think we showed up 4 hours behind the last boat that got in, but we had the barbecue going before we crossed the starting line. And then as we all stayed there that night, and when we were sailing back to La Paz for the final leg of the race, they were announcing the race results, and we were still 3 miles out. But we had the barbecue going, we had the music going, we had a fishing pole in the water. We were having a great time.
So you were in the Marines and you fought in Afghanistan?
No, I didn't. I had missed it all. I was in boot camp during Desert Storm.
Okay.
And so I thought, and I was told, you're going to Kuwait, you're going. And it ended before I finished my training. And so I wound up going to the reserves and going to school while I was in the Marine Corps. And I went to school for criminal justice and forensic anthropology and studying crime scenes and things like that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
You can do that in the Marines?
No, I did it separately. In the Marine Corps, I was in artillery.
Oh, so you use that for like the educational
right? I'm a third generation Marine. My grandmother was one of the first female Marines during World War II. Then my father was a Marine infantry officer during Vietnam, and then I enlisted. I was trying to one up the old man. He was an officer, and I enlisted, and I wanted to make NCO, get sergeant, and then go and get my commission after that. And
that's funny. My brother did that with my dad. My dad was a warrant officer.
That is like the end-all be-all position in the military. Nobody can fuck with a warrant officer.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
So, my brother joined the Army, and my brother hated my father, and it was a lifelong dream that he could outrank my dad, which he eventually got at captain. So
that's what my dad always told me. He says, if you make NCO, I'll get you your NCO sword. If you make your officer position, I'll buy you your officer's sword. And I wound up getting discharged after Desert Storm. They did a lot of the cutbacks. And I signed on for 10 years on an 8x2 contract, and I wound up serving just under 4. And then they discharged a lot of my platoon, and so I got my honorable discharge, and wound up later on going to the maritime captain school. So I have my 100-ton master captain's license, and my dad bought me a pirate's cutlass because I didn't make NCO or officer in the Marine Corps.
What's a pirate cutlass?
It's a short sword that's used for fighting on ships.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's why if you see the pirate swords, they're much shorter than you'd see like a cavalry sword or any infantry sword.
Yeah.
Because you need to be able to swing it down here. And that's actually why pirates wore eye patches. It wasn't because they'd lost their eye or hurt their eye. It was to go into battle. When you were up in the bright sun above decks fighting ship to ship, you would put the patch over your dominant eye. And so you would retain your night vision on one eye. And you'd fight and attack the other ship, and when you'd get aboard the other ship, and you have to go below decks to raid the hold, it's really dark down there. They didn't have lights. And so as you'd go down the hold, you'd take the eye patch and switch it to the other eye. So that way you have one eye that's good for night vision and one eye that's good for day vision. Because the rods and cones in your eye need about 15 minutes to transition.
Wow, cool. Do you have any other pirate knowledge nuggets or beautiful factoids you could share with us?
Lots of fun things like Blue Monday. Everybody talks about Mondays being bad. That came from sailing days as well, because punishments were meted out on Monday, and they would people would be whipped or flogged, and letting the cat out of the bag was bringing the cat o' nine tails out of the bag to whip people for punishment. And if it was a small boat and you didn't have the room to whip the sailor properly, you didn't have enough room to swing a cat. So that's where those terms came from.
Wow.
A lot of what we do, round robin, came from if you signed a complaint against the officers of a ship, whoever was the first one to sign the complaint was usually whipped or hung or punished in some sort of way. So they got to where they would sign their complaints in a circle. So no name was first, no name was last. They represented a unified front, issuing a complaint against the officers.
Wow, cool. I love knowledge nuggets.
There's really neat. Mount Vernon, which is where George Washington built his home.
Yeah.
He respected an English naval officer very much. His name was Vernon. And his sailors called him Old Grogram because he wore this old Grogram coat, which is an oiled skin heavy coat. And this is the British officer who cut the Royal Navy's rations of rum down with water and lime. And basically they would get a pint of rum a day for their ration. And Vernon cut it down with water. And so as an insult, they called the drink grog after Mount Vernon, which George Washington named his estate after.
Wow, cool. One of my favorite Winston Churchill quotes, the boat's spinning kind of quick, you know. Oh.
Shannon's doing evasive action.
Oh, fuck.
Let me poke my head out and make sure she's avoiding tourists.
Oh, shit. Wow, that's choppy. When Winston Churchill was the Prime Minister, he was criticized by the Department of the Navy in England, and his retort was, what does the Navy know? The Navy is all about rum, sodomy, and the lash.
And all right, we're going to be tacking here, so the boat's going to shift a little bit. It's going to be nice and smooth and easy.
Memories of Penang to Langkawi. At least we're not sideways. Listen to that. The sounds of Lake Tahoe. Well, that's exciting.
Great job, great job.
Nice work, everybody.
Fantastic.
As I sit in the cabin and sip sparkling water.
There you go.
What is your favorite line from the movie Captain Ron?
Well, Swab, we're going to give you a job. If you do that job well, we'll give you a better job. It's the incentive system, something I learned in rehab. Everybody loves hearing about the captain going to rehab.
That's great. What are your favorite sea movies? I like Mutiny on the Bounty and Sand Pebbles.
White Squall. White Squall with Jeff Bridges.
Okay.
That's a fantastic movie.
White Squall.
Mm-hmm. And then one nobody really knows about is Yellowbeard the Pirate. It is a pirate movie made with Cheech and Chong, the whole Monty Python crew, and then a lot of the Mel Brooks crew. They made a pirate movie. And it's fantastic. Most people don't know about it.
Cool. Well, that's a perfect transition to talk about your career in marijuana.
We prefer the term cannabis. Right?
Cannabis. Okay. Now, I remember a few years ago you gave me all these little... Uh-oh.
It's all good. The wind's picking up in the afternoon.
Okay. Nothing like genuine fear on a podcast. A lot of podcasts are done in comfortable, air-conditioned rooms. Not this one.
No, the wind's picking up to probably 15 knots right now. We have whitecaps out there. We started out and it was a nice, calm, flat day. We were all sunbathing and having,
that little Emerald
Bay.
Emerald Bay is lovely.
It's gorgeous with the tea castle, and then Vikingsholm, which is the Norwegian or Scandinavian longhouse built in there.
And that was built for what? Just...
It was a wealthy lady who decided she wanted to have that, and
nice.
She did that in the tea house.
Did you ever see that biopic about Ty Cobb, where Tommy Lee Jones played Ty Cobb?
Mm-mm.
When Ty Cobb retired from baseball, he lived in the Lake Tahoe area.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I always picture his racist, hate-filled self, driving around, cursing at dark-skinned people who didn't live here. Okay, so you gave me, it was funny because Ashna had a, wow, sorry, we're lunging.
No, Shannon's an amazing sailor. She's got it covered.
You gave me these little jars. I guess it was like liquid weed.
It's tincture.
And it was in these little eyedropper bottles with these little things on it. So it was great. So when I first moved to LA about 4 years ago, Ashton didn't want me to smoke pot all the time. So I got this living room full of books and bookshelves, and I put my little eyedropper things of weed behind the books. And so I would sneak like a couple of drops here and there. And she busted me, and I don't know how she one day was just happened to be looking behind this line of books, but I was found out, and yeah, that was not a happy day. But I told you, Ash and I are still great friends, and it's funny, as much grief that she gave me about marijuana through the years, now she's watering the marijuana plants that are growing on my balcony. So
I love that.
there's irony.
I get the same thing. My mom blocked me on Facebook because I'm a drug dealer now, and she doesn't want her quilting group to know that I sell and grow cannabis.
God damn, you were blocked by your mother?
Yeah, she blocked me on Facebook. And my dad, I've been debating with him for over 20 years on the efficacy of cannabis as a medicine, and I've finally gotten him to agree that it has medical efficacy, but he's had a stroke, a heart attack, and knee replacement, and he won't touch it because he's afraid the government will come and, take his guns and screw with his optometry licenses and things like that, which is a real fear. It's a real fear. The government's still doing that. We're still fighting every day. It's legal in several states, but we are still getting shafted on a daily basis. We can't use banks. We can't write off business expenses. We're fighting 80 years of prohibition that people have been brainwashed and indoctrinated with bullshit for 80 years.
Wow. So, but your income and your career is 100% cannabis now.
I wouldn't say we have an income. It's one of the myths of cannabis. People think you just throw out seeds and rake in money.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're doing it the right way, we haven't taken on outside investment. We are completely self-funded, and we work a lot with the medicinal market. So we are growing high CBD flowers that we infuse into organic olive oil. We work with raw cannabinoids, which don't get you high at all. And we work with a lot of children with epilepsy and cerebral palsy, and elder care with Alzheimer's, and veterans with PTSD. And so every dime we make from the company goes back into improving the company or helping out our compassion program. So Shannon and I haven't taken a paycheck in 3 years while building this business, and we've put everything we own into it, 100% lock, stock, and barrel, to make sure that this succeeds. And so it's a battle, but we hope we're doing the right thing, and at least we sleep well at night.
And so you have a little farm ranch that's certified by the state of California. Is that how it works?
Yeah, we are the very first permitted cannabis farm in Sonoma County, which is about an hour and a half north of San Francisco. We're right below the Emerald Triangle of Humboldt, Trinity, up there, and we are only allowed to grow 10,000 square feet, which is a quarter of an acre. And we're surrounded by vineyards, thousands upon thousands of acres of wine grapes grown everywhere, and they use massive amounts of fertilizers and pesticides. And we're organic cultivators. We grow completely organically. We don't use any pesticides. We don't use fertilizers. We use companion plants because we work with a lot of medical necessity and medically fragile people who can't take contaminants or have compromised immune systems. So we go through several stages of lab testing to make sure everything we do is clean and pure, so we're not causing more harm. And then we're starting to work with doctors and clinicians and researchers to see which combination of cannabinoids and terpenes work for which conditions, because it's all blocked at the federal level right now, or it has been forever.
And you told me it was really strict, where you have to itemize every leaf on the plant.
We have to keep track of and account for every leaf that grows on a cannabis plant. And if you do any Google searches of cannabis plants and you see some of the monsters that have been grown out there, it's just the uneducated being led by the misinformed, being led by the people who really, are still under the drug war mentality. And so we have to show up, we lobby, we vote, we show up to every...
But they're all religious freaks.
I wouldn't say there's religious freaks.
But in the, the conservative party that's... enacting these laws, and the thing from the Bible that always stuck with me is all seed-bearing plants I give to you.
Genesis chapter 1, verse 12. It's a beautiful one. I use that all the time, especially I have a lot of religious family members, and I love using that quote. And then there's another one that the plant shall set you free. I've seen that one running around a few times. And then the holy anointing oil in the Bible has cannabis in it. It was a mistranslation in the Septuagint from the Greek I think it was from the Aramaic to the Greek, where they mistranslated cannabosin and calamus. So there's references to cannabis all throughout the Bible. Tabernacle, where in the Jewish tradition would be a tent where the rabbis would go in and pray, they were actually burning hemp seeds and cannabis on the altars in the incense holders, and so they were hotboxing in the tabernacle. That's what the original thing was. And the holy anointing oil has over, I think it's like 6 kilos of cannabis infused into it. So if you get that on you, you're going to see God. And if you think about the miracles Jesus performed, and you would talk about casting out demons, if you see somebody with epilepsy and all of a sudden you give them cannabis oil and the seizures stop, it looks like casting out demons. Giving sight to the blind. If somebody has ocular pressure or glaucoma and they can't see because of the ocular pressure, and then you give them cannabis and all of a sudden the ocular pressure reduces and they can see again. Giving sight to the blind. And in the Bible it talks about baptism is okay, but anointing, the Christ actually means anointed one. And so if you have been anointed with this holy anointing oil, you are a Christ yourself. And so we're trying to find there's all this evidence that points to this, that, cannabis has been used since the dawn of time. And it's probably one of the very first agricultural crops that mankind kept with them. We have documentation of it on almost every continent and through every culture.
Do you any other marijuana knowledge nuggets you can lay on us?
Well, we could go for days
historical, or because the thing that pops in my mind, there's a documentary coming out about Mike Wallace, from the 60 Minutes reporter.
Yep.
And he was the hard ass guy. He would go in and politicians or scumbag business people. He was the guy. He was the real no nonsense reporter. There was my dad had a subscription to Playboy magazine, and I had 2 older brothers. So by the time it got to me, all the pictures were stuck together, and I read the articles. But when I was in summer school, I would take a razor blade and I would cut out the interviews, and I'd sit there with these Playboy interviews in my folder instead of because you're sitting there in summer school. But the thing I always remembered, they asked Mike Wallace if he had ever smoked marijuana, and he said yes, and I found that it had pleasant aphrodisiac qualities.
Absolutely.
And there's a hard-nosed journalist, so it made his dick hard.
Well, so many of the things that we've been told all of our lives about what cannabis does, it makes you lazy, it makes you stupid, it slows you down. We're finding out that it actually helps rebuild the neural connections in your brain. It doesn't cause brain damage, it heals brain damage. We're seeing all this brain trauma from the NFL and all these football players when we're finding the combination of whole plant THC and CBD with all the other 113 cannabinoids and the other 400 terpenes of the plant put together actually reduces the inflammation. Cannabis is over 20 times more anti-inflammatory than ibuprofen. It's over 30 times more pain relieving than aspirin. We actually have way more research on cannabis as an effective treatment for chronic long-term pain than we do for opioids. And then with the opioid problem, we're seeing that every state that has enacted legalized cannabis for medicinal use has seen a 25% drop in opioid prescription and use rate in each of those states. And what we're finding is the combination of THC and CBD, it allows the natural endogenous cannabinoids in our bodies and neural receptors and neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, the things that make us feel good, the feel-good chemicals in our brain. Cannabis isn't healing us, it's letting our bodies heal themselves. So cannabis slows down the reuptake of neurotransmitters and makes them work better, longer within your body. And so the same thing with opioids. If you add cannabis to your opioid regimen, you're going to need less opioids and you're naturally going to wean yourself off because the cannabis is making the opioid work better at lower doses.
Wow. And I was thinking about the soldiers with post-traumatic stress disorder, and all of America, the heartland is people are addicted to heroin.
Over 22 veterans a day are committing suicide.
Yeah. Wow.
And one of the big things we're seeing with PTSD is 2 of the big issues with PTSD is lack of sleep because of nightmares and bad dreams. And then the other one is being triggered. All of a sudden, a noise or a light or something will trigger, and they'll have a flashback of where they were, and it's very emotional. And what's happening is all those memories of what they've been through haven't been processed in the long-term memory yet. So every time they think about it or something brings it up, they get the physiological emotional response. They're going to get the adrenaline rush. They're going to get the entire just snap back into on the clock mode. They're going to be right there living it again because their body's not letting them process that into long-term memory where it strips the emotion from the memory. And so cannabis is one of the things that helps do that. It helps take those fresh memories and process them into long-term memories and take the emotional physiological response away from them. And it also helps with the sleep because if people are having trouble sleeping, if you take cannabis with that, it changes your REM cycle of sleep. So it allows you to get a full night's rest without going into the phase of REM sleep that allows you to dream. Now, one of the caveats to that is we have to ask people if they can't sleep. Do you have trouble falling asleep or do you have trouble staying asleep? For people that have trouble falling asleep, we recommend tinctures like ours, which enact fairly quickly in 20 to 30 minutes. Or you could just smoke it, which takes instant effect, and that will help you get to sleep. But it only lasts for a few hours. And so if people have a problem staying asleep, then we recommend stacking an edible in there too. Because an edible doesn't go directly into your bloodstream. It has to go through your entire digestion, and then it gets processed by your liver, where THC is converted into 11-hydroxy metabolite, which is 4 times more potent and lasts 4 times longer. That's why edibles are so brutal. They stopped selling space cakes to tourists in Amsterdam over this because people can't handle edibles.
I can't handle them either, and I stay away from them. I ate a few cookies about 3 years ago, and it felt like waiting for an illness to pass. Mm-hmm. You can't gauge how strong, the little gummy bear is, or the cookie, or the lollipop, or...
No, and I started out making pot ice cream in the Virgin Islands over 20 years ago. When I was working down there, I found a bale of weed that washed up on the beach and had been broken open. And it was saturated with salt water, and I couldn't sell it and I couldn't smoke it, and so I was trying to figure out what to do with it. And I found a book on cooking with cannabis, an old hippie book, at the Lemuria, the metaphysical bookstore on St. Croix, where you could get your bongs, pipes, crystals, incense, and a dildo or two if needed. And I found a great cannabis cookbook there and started reading about that, and I found out that I could leach all the salt water out of it and cook with it. And so I started making medicated pot brownies and pot ice cream, and so we made pot brownie ice cream sandwiches. And I had some friends that were on the island, some Rastafarians that were cultivators out in the boonies, and I offered to trade them treats for whatever trim they'd brought me. Next thing you know, I have contractor bags of trim coming from the rainforest showing up on my front porch. And so I had to figure out how to cook with this and do this. And so I over-medicated and over-consumed, and you can say overdose, but it doesn't cause any physical harm. You just think you're going to die every now and then. But I've over-medicated myself on cannabis so much that I've vibrated on a different frequency for years. And just learning by trial and error on how to make these properly. And this is where we got to get a lot of good information out there. Because if you walk into a dispensary and you say, well, I have issues with this and this, and I would like to find some relief, but I don't understand cannabis much, you might have somebody tell you, well, you want these gummies or you want these edibles. And these are people who are generally have a high tolerance for cannabis. And so a 10, 20, 30, 50 milligram edible wouldn't be anything for them. But for like Shannon, if she takes a 10 milligram edible, she's high for 2 days. Everybody's different. Everybody responds differently to cannabis. But a good general rule of thumb is a 2.5 milligram dose of THC is what we call a threshold dose. Most of the people up to 2.5 milligrams will not get high whatsoever, and a small percentage of the population will feel high from 2.5 milligrams. 5 milligrams is the beginning of a therapeutic dose, and then we recommend with our whole plant remedies to do around between about 10 and sometimes up to 20 depending on the case. Our kids that we work with epilepsy and cerebral palsy need much larger doses, but we're finding that if you use a whole plant medicine, you need a much lower dose and it's going to be much more effective. The problem we're seeing is people who do isolates and extracts. And when people do those, we're starting to see problems. People taking high doses of CBD, we're starting to see studies that show that it causes depression. And if they lower their dose of CBD down, the depression disappears instantly. Small doses of CBD are stimulating. Higher doses of CBD are sedating. And then how you combine the CBD with your THC, you never want to take one or the other alone. You always want to have a combination. Most of the cannabis that we've had in the world throughout all the human history had more of a balanced ratio of THC to CBD. And up until the mid-90s, almost all the cannabis in the world, the average THC content was 3% to 7% THC. Now that we've been breeding, because of the war on drugs, we had to take these natural, beautiful plants that have been growing outside throughout all of human history, and we had to shove them in warehouses and closets and garages and granny units, and we had to start doing like the bootleggers did. They didn't keep brewing beer, because who wants to lug a barrel of beer? They're going to start making moonshine, which they can carry in little jars. Same thing with cannabis. We started breeding the CBD out. We didn't know that's what we were doing then, because we didn't understand CBD. We started breeding strains that had higher and higher THC content and then crossbreeding them back. So we created all these amazing strains that have 20+% THC ratings. And so people think that's what they need when, I'm a heavy smoker. I've enjoyed cannabis and it's a good, healthy part of my life. But for me, I prefer, something around 12% with a broader terpene profile. Because THC is THC is THC, the same with CBD. There is no such thing as indica and sativa anymore when you're talking about THC and CBD. It's the terpenes around it that cause what is an indica or a sativa for the way it makes you feel. If you have something that's going to have more than 0.5% of myrcene, that's the terpene that designates an indica. It's going to be the couch lock, the heavy feeling. It's going to make you feel more sedated. It's going to have good pain relieving. In which also myrcene is also the predominant terpene in mangoes. So if you eat a fresh mango 45 minutes before you smoke, it's going to be like you smoked way more than you actually did.
No shit.
Because the myrcene
I
opens.
love mangoes.
Yeah, me too. And it's so great. A chilled one, especially like they do in Baja, with a little tahini
I
and
just
some
had one
seasoning.
in Paris. It was beautiful. I
Did
carry
you
a
get the last
special fruit peeler for when I travel.
Really?
Is that, it's like a potato peeler,
Mm-hmm.
but it works great on mango skin or whatever. That's really interesting, man. Like when I lived in Amsterdam, I found that a lot of the grown blending and all that stuff, a lot of the weed there, most of it was too strong. And I would find myself going into these coffee shops saying, what are your lower?
Mm-hmm.
I like to get high, but I don't want to have polio weed where you're on the couch and you can't lift your arms. And then I find that that's what's happening in California too. So I like this little personal, private endeavor of growing my own weed on my balcony.
Everybody needs to grow their own weed. Yeah,
Just like a light little sativa, because I don't want it. I don't want the.
Well, we got to get away from thinking sativa and indica. Those really don't mean anything anymore.
Okay.
Because we've crossbred the strains so much that there are really no true sativas and indicas outside of a breeder or somebody who has been maintaining genetics this long. Everything's been crossed over and over and over. And generally, an indica is supposed to be a short, bushy, thick plant that has a heavy head, and it's going to make you couch-locky and tired and sleepy. And a sativa is a long, spindly, thin, lacy plant that is very up and speedy and has a traditional high that's supposed to be creative.
That's what I like. I want to do shit, and I want to be creative.
Absolutely. And lower doses.
That's the reason I smoke.
We want something. Everything in balance. If you look at some of the greatest hashes out there, there's a hash maker, one of the most famous in the world. His name's Frenchie Cannoli, and he goes out into the mountains of
Frenchie Cannoli.
Frenchie Cannoli.
Sounds
He's amazing.
like a character in a Tarantino film.
Oh, he looks like a character from a Tarantino film. He goes. We are at all these events with him, and he brings this massive hookah that's part solar, part electric, and we will just sit. And it's a 6-person hookah. And we'll sit there and just smoke his hash all day with him. And it doesn't make you tired or lazy. You want to go do stuff. You want to experience stuff. And then when you look at it, it's a balanced ratio of cannabinoids. If you see all these isolates and distillates, people are trying to get that 99.9% pure THC. That's just one note. You don't go to the liquor store and buy Everclear and go, I like to drink. And you just drink Everclear. You're going to go buy a nice craft beer or a bottle of wine that's going to be fantastic because it was grown outdoor in the sun with love and care. Certain people do need higher doses of THC. You do need higher doses of THC to create massive cancer cell die-off. But you're going to get a better effect of that if you have plenty of CBD, THCV, CBGA, CBG. And that's like with our tinctures and what we make. We have a broad spectrum of cannabinoids. We do raw acidic cannabinoids.
What is a cannabinoid?
So cannabinoids are the parts of the plant that affect our endocannabinoid system. We have an endocannabinoid system within our bodies that affects everything that functions with us, from our sleep, our appetite, our mood, how our body heals itself, our digestion. Our endocannabinoid system regulates all of this, and what it does is it brings our body into homeostasis or balance. Like I said, cannabis doesn't heal you. Cannabis helps your body slow down to heal itself. And so here's an interesting thing. So we haven't seen a lot of peanut allergies or IBS or autoimmune or fibromyalgia. None of this we've heard about before the last 80 years when we've switched from having plants as our medicine. And whether people know it or not, we've been getting cannabinoids in our diet throughout all of human history. And the cannabinoids are the part like CBD, THC. They all start out as CBGA. So when you look out at a field of cannabis, think of it like a vineyard. You're not looking at bottles of wine, you're looking at grapes. When you look at that cannabis, you can eat it, but it won't get you high because it's THCA, not THC, or CBGA, or CBDA. You have to heat it, cook it, or burn it to convert it to get you high. So if you have THCA on the plant, it's not going to get you high, but it's extremely anti-inflammatory. It's extremely pain relieving. It works great on your body. But if you heat it, it changes the structure just a bit, removes the carboxyl group, converting it to THC, and that will get you high.
Cool. Okay, let me ask you this. You know, I'm growing. My plants on my balcony didn't get water for a few weeks, and then there's parts of it that are brown.
Mm-hmm.
So a friend of mine told me yesterday when I was home for one day, said you need to get some nitrogen in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was home for one day. I don't know where to find nitrogen, and I had Miracle Grow. And so I just mixed that up in the water and watered it, and you said that was a bad thing to do because
I wouldn't recommend any
Miracle
of
Grow is owned by Monsanto.
that. Monsanto's bought up General Organics, General Hydroponics through Scott's. There's all these...
Because other than that, my weed was pure and just was only water and sunshine.
Well, it depends on the soil, because you want to use good soil. Dirt is dead, soil is living. And
I got good soil from Home Depot. Nice.
We say we don't feed the plants, we feed the soil. And if we create a good soil, we're going to create good plants. We just won the grow off for Northern California last year, and everybody thinks indoor weeds the end all be all, that you can't grow the same quality and potency outdoors that you do
Boy, if
indoors.
they had a barbecue festival right across the street from the weed festival, that'd be perfect.
Well, it's funny, all these kids coming up and selling cookies outside of the dispensaries now, the Girl Scouts.
Smart.
And setting up food trucks outside the dispensaries.
Like, it's sad that they had that Gilroy garlic festival shooting the other day.
Yeah, and that
Because that was really an innocent, beautiful thing, and I really loved the garlic festival. And I wrote this joke that it's been my secret business plan that I wanted to one day across the street from the garlic festival to have the mouthwash and breath mint festival.
and I drive through Gilroy all of the time.
It's such a lovely place.
It's beautiful.
From San Jose to like Ventura, that's the breadbasket of America.
It's
There's so
beautiful
much
place.
food grown there.
And the garlic smell is just phenomenal.
And that's all Steinbeck novel territory as well. So,
well, that's something with somebody like that. This is something where cannabis can help all these people, because it can help balance out the neurotransmitters in our brain that help us be happy and calm, like dopamine and serotonin. Cannabis slows down the reuptake of that. And we were talking about, we haven't seen all these autoimmune diseases for the last 80 years because up until then, all of our livestock used to eat feral hemp. Our cows would eat feral hemp. We'd feed the seeds to the chickens. The pigs would eat it. So when we'd have eggs or milk or cheese or meat, we were getting cannabinoids in our body.
Wow.
And our body naturally produces 2 endogenous cannabinoids. It's made in our body. And that's anandamide and 2-AG. Anandamide is where we get that runner's high. You know, if you exercise and you feel amazing, that's anandamide. It's similar to THC in our body. The problem is the body breaks it down and reabsorbs it so fast it doesn't last long. But if you add cannabis to that, it makes that last longer in your body. So all of these things we're seeing, like autoimmune, it's our body going into a feedback loop where when you hurt yourself normally, like you hit your thumb with a hammer, you're going to have heat and inflammation, and that's natural. You need that to heal. That's acute inflammation. But when it gets into chronic inflammation, it starts breaking down tissue and causing long-term damage like arthritis. And that's a feedback loop in your neurotransmitters saying, we need more inflammation, we need more inflammation, we need more inflammation, and your body won't
So weed
stop.
can help arthritis?
Absolutely. It stops the feedback loop producing the inflammation, and then it's also extremely anti-inflammatory. And we started making this, my wife and I started making these to help ourselves. Like I said, I'm a former Marine. I played football. I was a bouncer and a repo guy, and, I've lived a wild, crazy life. And I'm pretty much, scar tissue and damage held together by bubblegum and tattoos. And I had to learn how to help myself because my body was really deteriorating rapidly. And when I first discovered cannabis, I couldn't believe how much better I felt.
So what are some of the best lessons that you've learned in your full life?
Jesus, listen, to everybody, and travel. The only thing you're going to learn about, any prejudice you have about somebody's going to go away the moment you stay in their house or let them stay in your house.
And I see you're reading the Celestine Prophecies. I haven't seen that book since the mid-'90s.
I know, it's a crazy book. I haven't read it since the mid-'90s. When I got out of the Marine Corps is when I smoked my first joint. And I thought, what the hell am I doing with my life? I don't want to be here, so I sold everything I owned but a bag of clothes and a guitar. I picked an island out of a book and hitchhiked to the airport and spent the next 10 years in the Virgin Islands running around. And when I was down there, somebody told me about this book and gave it to me, and I started reading it. And I was explaining it to one of my coworkers. He said, well, I think the guy in the kitchen has been reading the same book. And I went back, and he and I were reading the Celestine Prophecy, and we were on the same chapter. And wound up becoming, friends for a long time. And the whole book's about...
That's no coincidence.
It's all about paying attention to coincidences.
That's the whole book is about, that there are no coincidences, and that the people that you meet in your life come into your life for a reason.
And if you keep seeing the same people, find out why. I just ran into a guy that I know from San Francisco, and I've been trying to run into him in San Francisco forever, and we just kept missing. And I saw him put a post that he was heading down to Los Angeles for a while, and I thought, I should tell him I'm going to be heading that direction. And I didn't get a chance to. 3 days later, I was in a place I'd never been before, in a part of town I've never been before, and I was sitting there working on a presentation I was doing, and he walks right in the door. And you got to pay attention to those things, find out what that's about, and just keep your head up and your eyes open.
So when I saw that book, I told you I have a funny story about that book, and I'll tell you once we're rolling for the podcast. So that book came out somewhere in the early 90s, mid-90s. It was a big sensation. Everybody was reading it. And this girlfriend I had at the time was really into it, and she urged me to read the book. So I'm a reader, and I knocked it out pretty quick. I think the book is poorly written, but I enjoyed the sentiment that there is no coincidence in life and that people come into your life for a reason. So when I had my sitcom on NBC, I was sent around America to do interviews. And I did some Atlanta, Georgia afternoon, NBC afternoon show, Today Atlanta, Good Day Atlanta, one of those types of things. And James Redfield, the author of the Celestine Prophecy, was on the show with me. And I was kind of cracked up because I had read the guy's book. So the very next day when I'm leaving Atlanta, I get on the plane. He's sitting in first class. And I walk by him and I go, hey, James or Mr. Redfield or whatever. I said, hi, I'm Tom Rhodes. I'm a comedian. I was on that show with you yesterday. And he was reading, and he looked up to me and he goes, oh yeah, hey. Not enthusiastic. And then I swear to Jesus, 1 week later, I was on a plane again and saw the guy again. And I said, hey, James, Mr. Redfield, it's Tom Rhodes, comedian. We were on that show together in Atlanta. And again, the guy looked up at me, very unimpressed by the coincidence, and just went, oh yeah, hey. And I'm thinking, I read your fucking book, dude. You said there's no coincidences. So, anyways, that's what I think about when I see that book. Is that guy sitting in first class and...
I've had 3 different people bring up this book to me in the last 2 weeks. And then we're in the process of building out our manufacturing and distro space. And I've had 3 people mention the Celestine Prophecy to me in the last few weeks. And when I walked in, it was sitting on Shannon's desk. And apparently it was one of her the boxes that she'd stowed away. And now we're bringing all that out. And it was just there. And so I thought there's too much. I'm going to read it again just to see what's going on. You got to pay attention.
So speaking of people coming into your life for a reason... Where and when did you and I meet? We met in Lake Tahoe here?
Yeah, we met here in Tahoe.
At the Improv at Harvey's.
I think it was either the Improv at Harvey's or up on the North Shore. It was a much bigger room.
That little tiny gig?
Yeah, and then it was a big room with not many people, but they had these communal booths.
Yeah.
And it was like a retirement bus that came in, and they gave every one of these octogenarians a free ticket to come see you. And I had specifically come up to see you perform.
Yeah, I think you were the only one who had paid to get in.
Yeah, I think Shannon and I paid to get in. And we were sitting in the
you were you were a fan and stuff. Yeah. So it was I basically did that show for you.
Well, thank you very much.
No one else. Do you remember, we'll wrap this up in a second, the joke I used to do, it was actually a true story, but it was the worst thing that ever happened to me from smoking marijuana.
Yeah.
Where I was in Appleton, Wisconsin, and these 2 women
Oh, that breaks my heart every single time. No, please come back. Please come back.
They were nurses, and they worked together at the local hospital. They were really good friends, and it was their fantasy they wanted to have sex with a guy together. And they chose this guy that they worked with at the hospital, and they fucked him. And he told everybody. Then everyone in the hospital where they worked knew, everyone in the little town where they lived knew. And they were mortified with embarrassment. And then it dawns on me why they're telling me the story. I'm from out of town. I'm not going to tell anybody but comedy club audiences for the rest of my life. And we go back to my hotel room, and it's on, baby. And I'd never been with two women before. I didn't know what threesome etiquette was. We get back to my room, and I pulled out a joint, and I go, do you guys want to smoke some pot? And I swear to God, they looked at each other, and they went, oh, my God, there's drugs? We got to go. And they left. And that was the loneliest joint I have ever smoked in my life.
The look on your face when you tell that story, I remember you just be sitting there,
It's true.
just holding a little roach with your fingers and, pursing your lips and take that little lonely puff by yourself. That's one of my favorite stories that you tell.
That's great. It was a true story. So, Cameron, I've always, since I've met you, I always thought you're a really good-hearted dude. You do a lot of great things to make the world a better place, and you're passionate and dedicated about weed. I've wanted to have you on the podcast for as long as I can remember. So, what business of yours and your social media can we promote for the listeners?
Absolutely. Our company is Fiddler's Greens, and that's our organic cannabis company. We make CBD tinctures and ITHC tinctures, and our Instagram is fiddlers.greens, and our website is fiddlers-greens, and we have a lot of educational information there too. And if anybody writes our website about questions about cannabis or cannabis medicine, I answer personally, and I don't just say, hey, I know a lot about this, take my word for it. We are a community that shares information, so every doctor or researcher I work with or listen to, I give people their links so they can research it as well.
Can people order things, or it doesn't work like that because of
We're only in California because we're whole plant cannabis.
Yeah.
We can't ship outside of state lines yet. We're hopefully soon. But we're in over 100 dispensaries all over California. And if you go on our website, fiddlers-greens.com, you can go on to where you can find us page, and there's a map and a list of all of the dispensaries where you can find us. And if you have a dispensary that you prefer and we're not in, give us a call and we'd be happy to go talk to them. And then we also teach free educational classes on cannabis and cannabis medicine, everything from childhood maladies to elder care. And we're happy to share all of our information. We believe in community over competition, and we're just trying to share that full sun-grown cannabis is the best way to go.
Community over competition.
Absolutely.
Wow. Who's got a mindset like that these days?
All of us crazy stoner pot farmers up in Northern California who are getting fucked by legalization. We're all for legalization, but the big money's coming in and just causing havoc with everybody. We have companies that are burning $1 million a month just to put their face in front of people, when small farmers like Shannon and I, we sell every bottle to pay one of our people or to get the next bottle. And so all of us who are small craft cultivators, small craft makers, even though we have people who make almost identical products to what we do, they're not our competition. They're our community. We put our arms around each other, and we like to say either we're all going to hang together or we shall surely all hang separately, the old Ben Franklin quote. But we believe that we're all on the same team and we're all moving this forward together, and we're going to keep the people who've been in this. I mean, we wouldn't have legalized cannabis right now if it wasn't for the gay community and the AIDS crisis in San Francisco. It wouldn't be, all the people who've put their lives on the line, lost their families, gone to jail. These are the people who created this, not these, chads that are coming in this bro science where they're like, CBD's bro. No, this is about the plant. This is about doing good for the community. Cannabis and hemp is something that's going to change the entire face of the planet and make sure that everybody can have a hand in it. This is one of the most egalitarian things that could ever be. Grow it in your yard. Put seeds everywhere. Grow it everywhere until it's like any other tomato. I mean, do you buy indoor avocados? Nobody buys indoor avocados. Who the fuck wants an indoor avocado? Let's grow full sun, beautiful cannabis, and let's get everybody doing it, and then we're going to get the real information out there so we can get rid of all these people who've been brainwashed through 80 years of prohibition.
I love plants. My mom has always had a nice garden. She got me into it. On my balcony, I've got a navel orange tree, a peach tree, I've got a jacaranda tree, and then I got many pepper plants and rosemary, blah-de-de-blah. And the marijuana plant is so beautiful to watch it grow. It's such a beautiful plant.
Oh, she's gorgeous, and she loves attention, and she's going to tell you everything she needs.
Okay. Is there any non-marijuana knowledge nugget factoids that you can delight us with? Because I know you're an intelligent guy.
Give me a topic. We can on the cannabis
Oh,
side.
okay, I know about marijuana. I've been on a big Louis Armstrong kick.
And
Louis
beautiful story
Armstrong.
about Louis
Armstrong smoked marijuana every day of his life.
He did, and he also got Richard Nixon to smuggle 2 pounds of weed through customs coming back from Europe.
No shit.
Louis Armstrong. It was in the jazz community, man. There's so many things about jazz saved cannabis and promoted cannabis. And in the beginning of the Prohibition, Harry Anslinger directly targeted the jazz musicians. He wanted to crush them, and he directly contributed to killing Billie Holiday. There's a great book by Johann. It's called Chasing the Scream. And it's a brilliant book about addiction and the war on drugs. And so, to get back to the Louis Armstrong story, Louis Armstrong was traveling Europe as an ambassador for the United States.
Yeah.
And as he was coming back through customs, he picked up a bunch of cannabis and he was smuggling it back into the States. And he thought he hasn't been searched anywhere he's gone as a U.S. ambassador, that he wasn't going to get searched. Well, he got called out and was going to be searched coming back into the United States. At the same time, Richard Nixon and his entourage were coming back into the United States. And Nixon saw Louis being stopped and searched, and he goes, "This man's a national treasure. He's not to be searched." Richard Nixon picked up the suitcase with the 2 pounds of weed in it and carried it through customs for Louis.
Wow, where did you hear that story?
It's Chasing the Scream by Johann Hari.
Wow, beautiful.
Yeah, and there's another great, Martin A. Lee, Smoke Signals. He wrote a beautiful book. It goes, once you read about the history of the prohibition of cannabis, it is the biggest bunch of bullshit that's ever happened, and the fact that it happened is just a tragedy for all of humanity.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in Florida years ago, you could have your home or your car seized for just having one marijuana cigarette on your possession. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous. Well, I think the Louis Armstrong is a great way to end the podcast. You're a beautiful man. We've got a little more sailing to do.
Absolutely.
Everyone should listen to the Louis Armstrong album, The Songs of W.C. Handy. That's one of my personal favorites. And
smoke some muggles and have some tea.
And what's it called? Your
Fiddler's Greens?
No, the coagulos, the kababonims.
The cannabinoids.
Cannabinoids. That is my new favorite English word.
THC is the cannabinoid that everybody knows.
And you should watch the Bill Murray movie What About Bob as soon as possible. For the end of episode 300 here, I'm going to take the Zoom recorder outside so we can listen to the sounds of Lake Tahoe as I say goodbye. Oh, look at all that sunshine. Hey, Shannon, thanks for steering the boat.
My pleasure. I tried to avoid most of the potholes.
You did a great job. Wow. It is look at all those sun sparkles.
Beautiful.
And all the pine trees and mountains. Cobalt blue, clear water. It's absolutely stunning. I'm the luckiest man in the world to have such fantastic friends. All right, well, this has been episode 300. I want to thank all my listeners and the people who contribute to the podcast. And it's an honor to fill your head with goodness and knowledge and wonderful people like Captain Cameron Hattan. So this is episode 300. Shalom, amigos, amigas. Long may you run.
Tom Rhodes, you're a funny man. Tom Rhodes, you're an international comedian. Tom Rhodes, karate kick, baby, oh yeah. Tom Rhodes, you're a groovy dude. You go all around the world, telling jokes to all of the people. You are an international comedian. You're funny to everybody in every single country in the world. Tom Rhodes, I like you very much. I think you're talented and very wonderful. Tom Rhodes, you're the best guy in the world. I wanna be your friend. You should call me sometime. Here is my my phone number, 603-644-0048. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tom Rhodes, you're an international comedic sensation. Tom Rhodes, I like to listen to your podcast. Tom Rhodes, you're the best man to ever walk on the earth.